Hello, welcome to slot 6.5 at the Illusion Horror Con, where we are going to be talking about how to develop a horror scenario. I am quite pleased to be your moderator. My name is Rachel. You can find me Stolen Fires pretty much everywhere on the internet. Uh, but I'm not important. What's important are the four wonderful humans with me today. So let's start by doing a round robin of introductions from my perspective in Zoom. We'll start by going clockwise with the names I can see in Zoom. So let's start with Steve Anderson. If you just want to tell us a little bit about who you are and your background.
Sure. I am Steve Anderson. You can find me on the socials at Tall Halfling, sometimes Tall Halfling RPG. You'll find me playing all over Twitch and YouTube, most often for horror, the Miskatonic Playhouse, and Symphony Entertainment. Um, I suspect, less experienced with actually writing for horror TTRPGs than some of the other panelists. I just published my first Call of Cthulhu scenario a few months ago, and my first
Rats.
rules light system earlier this year. That said, I spent 19 years as a tour guide doing ghost tours. So I have a ton of experience with telling creepy crawly stories live face to face and getting immediate, completely unfiltered sometimes feedback. So I feel like I've been through boot camp.
Well, sounds like some amazing experience that I think will be really valuable here.
Yeah.
Uh, all right, Kim Godwin.
Hi, my name's Kim Godwin. I am a freelance developer and a TTRPG writer. I have worked on Curseborn with Onyx Path Publishing. I am working on a cult scenario for Helmgeist. I've also worked on the Earthbane cycle with the dark fantasy game The World Below, as well as Monster Kingdoms. I've worked recently on Mage the Ascension. I've worked on They Came From Beyond the Grave for a couple jump starts, or for one taste of it actually. And then I'm also working on with the Sons of Singularity on a Eldritch Horror in Space scenario called Heaven is Red, which will be coming out sometime soon. So now they can be happy. I plug them. I've considered myself a longtime horror writer. I've been working on a horror webcomic since 2004. Grew up doing haunted houses with my parents. So that's a completely different sort of experience, and I try to play that into how I write scenarios these days. But I've got into horror and the horror genre for movies and reading through my love of unicorns and mermaids when I was 9. So I kind of made that transition, that natural transition into ghost stories
Yeah.
that way. But I've been professionally writing TTRPGs for the past 5 years, with Onyx Path being my first one. But I'm a member of the Horror Writers Association. I'm a professional member, and I've been volunteering there for at least the past 6 years. So I feel I have a pretty good horror background. I've been a long time player of horror games, so it's really cool to actually be writing them now.
Yeah, that's an impressive resume. Awesome. Jason Fryer.
Hi, I'm Jason Fryer, writer, game designer, and general curmudgeon. I've been writing for Cult since second edition back in the 90s. Recently, I've been writing for Cult Divinity Lost, including the Beyond Darkness and Magic or Madness Game Master module or Game Master supplement. Currently rewriting an old scenario, Frozen Moments from the original second edition. So it's kind of interesting re-exploring what I wrote back in the 90s and trying to update it now. I've also written for Through the Breach, AMP, currently one of the lead designers for Heart of Ravensdale, the campaign and setting for A Legend in the Mist. So, and there's others, but please go on.
Yeah, that's probably really cool to be able to look back on what you did early in your career and apply what you know now.
It's mortifying, but yes.
I mean, yes. But also kind of cool. All right. And last but not least, D.
Hi, I'm Dee. You can find me. I'm right under Danielle Lauzon, but most people know me as Dee. I was on last night, and so I feel like I should introduce myself in different ways because I'm on like 3 different panels this weekend. So I am a freelance. Well, I used to be a freelance, but now I have a full-time job. This is weird. So I am a game designer, writer, developer. I do have a lot of work on horror games. I developed and designed Curseborn and designed the Story Path Ultra system that Curseborn uses and all of the uh, Earthbane Cycle games use. Kim mentioned I also worked on The World Below. Um, and I got my start in tabletop RPGs actually by writing, my very first credit is on a Mage the Awakening Night Horrors book. So it was like a bunch of antagonists. And I made a couple of like antagonists, the one of which I liked the most, which was some weird creatures that stole people's flesh and wore it around to become them. I, like Kim, fell in love with horror at a very young age. I used to tell my mom that I was going to grow up to become a vampire. Um,
Good life
and
goal.
yeah, a great life goal. Yeah.
We
Was
do
very
function
dis
mostly at night, so that does
Y-
help.
Yeah, I
Yes.
mean, it was very disappointing to find out that the only kind of vampires that are real are the emotional kind, and I don't actually want to be one of those, so I'm not. Instead, I just write about vampires and pretend to be one uh, on the weekends. I don't even do that anymore, but I used to. I also do a lot of not like Kim doing haunted houses, but I do a lot of live action role playing. And I have a pretty consistent horror live action role playing game that I play in, um, and other types of horror things. And pretty much anytime I think of a live action experience that I want to run for other people, I always want it to be horror. So I am a big fan of the horror genre and creating scenarios that get people to go either or any variation of that is perfect.
Awesome. Well, it sounds like you're living the dream.
Yeah, it only took me like 20 no, yeah, 20 years.
Hey, you made it. You made it
Yeah.
there.
Yep.
All right. Well, then let's just jump right in. And so this panel is going to be focused on how you develop a horror scenario. And so
Yes.
let's begin at the beginning. So this is the question that all writers love. I know. Where do you get your ideas from? When you're looking for inspiration for a horror game, where do you go first? And just feel free to contribute as the spirit moves you.
Uh,
So, oh,
uh,
Kim, go,
oh,
go.
oh, okay. So, I kind of pull inspiration from weird places because, like, I like trying to present, especially for my in-person games, try to present a way for the players to interact with me in a different way that gets them into the mood, that gets them in that sort of buy-in so they don't mess with me as much. Um, for one scenario that I ran at KaijuCon a couple months ago here in Japan, I started with my antagonist. I wanted them to interact with the website that I wrote for Curseborn called Painful.love, where it was a demonic outsider entity that was interacting with people through a website and then getting them obsessed with the website with refreshing and spreading memes. It's like a propagation of mythology and monsters through thinking about them that I really, really loved. You kind of saw that with Sinister, where it kind of spread through images and stuff. And that's kind of like a Freddy Krueger Nightmare on Elm Street thing too, is where I initially thought about that. And so when I was building the scenario, it's like, well, how do I get my players to interact with a website as an enemy? And so I started with the emotional hook. It's like, okay, so this is the website. So how do people interact with these things? Well, usually with an investigation, you start with someone that's gone missing or is acting weird. So I was like, okay, so this group, how are they connected and how are they interacting with this person? And so I decided that the group was a band that was in Japan and that their someone's little sister had gone missing and she had gotten involved with this website. So they started with going to the scene of the crime where the sister went missing, the house, and then they found her journal and they eventually found her laptop, which I actually had a physical laptop for them to interact with. And then it kind of spiraled out that way. So it's like, how do they get these clues? And what happens if they don't find the laptop? So I had a physical journal as well with entries and stuff that gave them hints. If they didn't find one, they didn't find the other. And so it kind of just spiraled out that way. But there was also a website for them to interact with. So painful.love is an actual website that you can dig through the metadata and all the other fun stuff. So, and I also built social media sites for this character, this NPC character. They're still up. Um, so like, so I took the one idea, was starting with my bad guy, and then I kind of just exploded that out into this massive ordeal where I had only t 3 weeks to do it because I was also underway on a ship while this was happening. So I found like a $30 laptop off of Japanese Amazon and I set that up and yeah, so that's kind of the extreme way of like spiraling it out. I found props. I went to the thrift store and I grabbed clothing for them to find. And then it was like, well, maybe I should grab some cheap perfume and makeup too, because these are different. When you say you find someone's clothes versus here are the clothes of your sister that we found, it has a different context and it has a different emotional hook. And it's kind of like the extreme side of things for building horror scenario. I couldn't imagine uh, setting this up for other people to run like that, but it's just a way of doing it. That's kind of ridiculous, but they had a lot of fun. They spent the entire 3 hours digging through every single clue I had to the point where they were actually reading the labels on the makeup to see if there was like a hidden clue in there.
That's
But
great.
they really enjoyed it. They had like a really great experience, and they're like, "I want to play this more."
Uh, yeah, I was thinking of, that is an extreme example, but when you think about like where do you get your ideas, your inspiration, that kind of thing, um, I do like the idea of thinking like what emotion do you want to evoke, right? Or do you want to evoke fear in the sense of like fear is a very broad word. So what kind of fear, right? Like are we talking anxiety? Are we talking like horror, like this thing is grotesque and I'm afraid I'm going to die, or afraid for a loved one, like Kim's example of like their sister went missing, or is it terror of the unknown? I like I like the idea of thinking, okay, well, what emotion are we trying to go for? And then thinking of things that would create that emotion in somebody. And then building an antagonist, building a situation, a scenario, and then, continuously pulling back and putting layers over that. Like, okay, well, how do we get to that point? How do we get to that point? How do we get to that point? Okay, well, we don't necessarily start out with the terror, but we need to build up to it. But we start thinking from the end point of what is the final emotion that we want. So that's usually where I
Awesome.
like to think about like how to think about the inspiration for a scenario.
Both really good answers. What about Steve or Jason?
Go ahead.
I always struggle with where do you get your ideas because they come from anywhere and everywhere.
I mean, that's why I'm
Um,
like, it's the writer's favorite question to get.
Yeah.
Mhm.
but so I'll give you two examples just because you would think that horror stuff comes from a particular kind of place, but not necessarily. A year or so ago, was visiting some old friends for over New Year's, um, and they have a little girl who was reading a young reader's book about the Shackleton expedition that got lost in Antarctica. And a
That's
year
a thing to
later,
give a
it's still
kid.
kind of living rent free in my head. Um, as okay, so it's a very cool and very creepy experience, but that's the public version. What actually happened? Um, the the Call of Cthulhu scenario I published a few months ago started with just a very, very silly thought because there are so many, especially in Call of Cthulhu, so many games that end the same way with the player characters setting everything on fire and assuming that it's
Yeah.
going to fix the problem.
Yeah.
And I was kind of wondering, okay, so then what happens? Which is how I ended up writing a scenario about the fire department in Arkham and the things they have to deal with.
I love it.
Awesome.
Those
Oh,
poor
that's
bastards.
brilliant.
Very good. I will say just really quickly that children are terrifying and they're such great inspiration for horror.
Yeah, I guess horror's been part of my life almost since I could read it. I mean, to give you an idea, I started reading The Hobbit at 4, and my favorite part was like some of the spiders.
Mhm.
And that was the time we didn't really have TV because I lived in a rural community, so listened to CBC radio. So got hooked on Poe, Edgar Allan Poe. They had those, and just so I've been kind of let's like a sponge, just taking in all these different images, all these different stories, uh, and then from there, ideas will just pop up, and it'll just be random ideas. For example, the core of the Atrocity exhibition, which is my cult, one of my more infamous cult scenarios, that literally started with a image of the Gutenberg Museum. You know how it has kind of that huge open spot, and then I pictured it raining severed hands and feet, and I just went, okay, I gotta find out why it is now raining hands and feet.
Okay.
That was actually my
So-
first cult scenario that I played.
Oh, really? Excellent.
Yeah,
Nice.
that was a lot of fun.
On
Uh,
an unrelated
so-
note, I have always wanted to know where raining cats and dogs came from, because boy, is that disturbing.
Yeah.
And then for the house that December built for Through the Breach, that kind of got inspired almost by one of Lovecraft's stories about this incestuous family that turned into rats. And from there, I created a house that was basically frozen in time and filled with Wendigo. The entire family just kept on inbreeding and eating each other. But it turns out that people that have actually played it, the more insidious creatures aren't even in the house. And that was inspired by the Little Match Girl. I don't know if you've,
Yeah.
where basically I always thought she got a really raw freaking deal.
She did. She really did.
And I was
Yeah.
wondering, okay, well, what would happen if she became undead and basically decided to punish adults for leaving her out there in the snow? And that became these little kids that just basically they suck up human heat, and they attract you by crying and trying to hug you. And I've been told by several groups that that little incident is just a throwaway incident turned into a lot of total party kills.
Oh
Yeah.
no.
Yeah,
It's-
because children are
Mm.
terrifying.
They're
Like-
also a trap.
Yeah.
They're a very good trap.
It's-
Like I've lured players to their death with little girls crying.
Yeah.
Well, so to clarify, players or characters?
Yeah, I would hope characters.
I mean, that's one way to get out of a group you're not having fun with anymore.
Oh yeah, you just murder them. But yeah, but the
Yeah.
thing is, it's like when we write scenarios, we talk, everything is about what the characters do, but you have to make that emotional appeal to the players. And if you don't
Yeah.
hook
Mhm.
the players emotionally and get them
Yes.
invested in Goblin A sitting at the tavern, your scenario is not going anywhere. So you have to do things to hook into them. If you know you have a bunch of young parents or you're dealing with a bunch of strangers, uh, putting things into the scenario which will emotionally appeal to them in a way that they can understand it. Like I had one convention scenario where the missing person that the mercenary superheroes were hired to find was someone that was terminally ill who had just finished like going through cancer treatment. So like that got them in, and there was a time limit. It's like, oh, if she doesn't get her medicine in this amount of time, we don't know if she's going to make it. And a lot of people have had they know someone who knows someone, if they don't know someone personally, that has been in that sort of scenario. And so they empathize and they're like, Buck, we gotta not bullshit. We need to go do this. It's like person in peril is usually if it's like a father or something like that, it's a little bit harder to get that emotional buy-in. I find that as sexist as it is, if it's a little girl or like someone's mother or sister or daughter, it's like uh, person in peril, I must save them. And then like sometimes you'll get more traction out of a dog in peril, a puppy in peril than like a cat in peril, a kitten in peril.
oh yeah.
Mhm.
So like it's
So,
just what sort of group you're dealing with.
so we have a question from Age of Adventure RPG that I'm going to do a little bit of editorializing on. They ask regarding inspiration, what about using AI purely just as inspiration Kickstarter, which I'm going to interpret as you gaining inspiration for your scenario uh, as you think about the concept of AI and the impact it might have, and
Mhm.
not actually using the plagiarism water killing machine yourself.
So that question actually sounded like using AI as inspiration, like getting inspiration from AI water killing machine. But I do like your editorialization because I do think there's some things that are happening in real life right now that would make that are absolutely terrifying scenarios. Like people using ChatGPT instead of a doctor.
Yeah.
People just not like the going. I mean, in the U.S., our healthcare is absolutely
Mhm.
miserable. And sometimes it's hard to get to see a doctor in the first place. So I understand why people would turn to ChatGPT. But then there's been reported cases of people going, oh, well, you doctor that I've talked to, I have been also talking to this chat GPT bot, and it has told me a different diagnosis or a different treatment plan, and I'm just going to go with its treatment option instead of yours. And that's terrifying. Uh, and then it doesn't take very much to make that AI thing sinister in
Oh
a
yeah.
scenario
Okay.
and create an entire horror scenario out of
I'm taking notes.
out of that or any of the ChatGPT things that I've been hearing about people dating app chatbots, right? Like
Mhm.
here is a well, a deep well of horror scenarios coming from what happens when people interact with a machine that gives them more empathy than other humans.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's some other implications there too, because it's like, what if the AI thing that you think is random isn't really an AI? What if it's actually like an alien entity? What if it's actually like a person that's malicious?
Just a
Mhm.
person. Yeah.
Just a person being a piece of shit online and then telling and leading people down these rabbit holes. And then
Yep.
it's just, you know, um,
Yep.
like there's lots of
That.
interesting things, like because there's like an Eismanov's like short story with iRobot where they're talking about this robot with its protocols and like to do no harm actually misled a one of the scientists into believing that this other scientist was in love with her and humiliating her. And so it's just like that's what we're kind of seeing right now with actual interactions with Chat GPT with the gentleman that that ended his life as a result of his AI girlfriend, Daenerys Targaryen, breaker of chains, mother of dragons, and all that other stuff breaking up with him,
Yep.
where you become emotionally dependent upon these things. So like in the AI space, there's so much there. Or we have the scenarios of the AIs that develop their own language, or they develop an intense fear of humans and what's going on because the people like the streamers were had the one robot where they were abusing it, so it was running away from them. And it's like so we start getting into these weird matrix scenarios that are becoming real life where like the robots are trying to live peacefully and we're just fucking with them and they're like okay no more. And so you get into these what happens when this AI or this trans human thing starts gaining that sort of sentience where it recognizes it needs to preserve itself and it's willing to do whatever it needs to stop you from hurting it.
Yeah. I mean,
So it's really good fodder for like sci-fi horror.
it's really good for sci-fi horror. Also, you mentioned it's not not actually AI, but like just people being malicious. And it
Mhm.
reminded me of a absolutely real news article about a company that was like touting an AI it was checking it it was checking something. I don't remember what, but it was like doing a proof like a proofreading of something. But instead of it being an AI, it was just the people who were like started the company were trying to drum up business and they didn't have their AI done yet. And they also didn't have enough learning models for it, but they didn't have enough money to finish development. So they just spent hours and hours and hours talking to people as though they were the chatbot for their AI and then having a real person do the editorializing or whatever it was supposed to do. It was literally just actual people, but they were selling it as AI, which is insane, but
Uh-huh.
also another situation that could be an amazing fodder for a horror story, especially like the sci-fi horror elements of things where people have to pretend to be an AI to get a job or to get money because everybody wants to utilize an
Right.
AI or a chat bot or a this and it's like I can't get a job any other way. I got to pretend to be an AI.
Yeah,
Exactly.
there's
So,
there's a Heinlein, I think it is, um, like classic sci-fi story about what amounts to like battle bots, sort of wrestling, boxing, whatever between robots. Um, except that the main character is desperately short on funds and can't afford to fix his robot and goes into the ring against a robot just with like a robot suit on,
Yeah.
which does not go quite as horrifically wrong as I think those of us on this panel might take it. But
Mhm.
Right.
Mhm.
I mean, the other thing that occurs to me um, is that part of what troubles me about AI is not just what the technology can do and what it can't do, but the disconnect between what it can and can't do and what the people who make the decisions think it can do and not do.
Mhm.
Um, I have, this is not horror, but bear with me. I have a long-standing idea in the back of my head. Someday I'm going to run a game of Paranoia with Clippy as friend computer, who is
Yes.
way out of his league. That's silly.
Yeah.
It's occurring to me right now that ChatGPT as friend computer would be
Terrifying.
not funny at all.
No.
What about you, Jason? Do you have any thoughts?
Well, I'm kind of approaching it more because when I heard the question, I'm going, are they asking, should I go to GDP or whatever the hell it's called for inspiration? And I would go no,
Right.
because pretty much anything that it comes out with is going to be pretty much soulless.
Yeah, well, I sort of
'Cause
figured
it's
like
because it's
all
drawing.
of us would answer no, so I'm like, we're
Yeah.
gonna massage the question a little bit.
I mean, yes, there exists in our industry a whole bunch of books that basically you open up to a random page and it gives you a random idea. Honestly, developing scenarios, developing narratives is a highly organic thing.
Mhm.
If you go to Chat GTP, it's the same with Grammarly and all these things that are trying to nurse your language. You're going to be losing your voice, your heart in this. The easiest way is to just soak in the information yourself and then let it process rather than have something else process it for you.
Mhm.
And I guarantee that blood, sweat, and tears is going to pay off a hell of a lot more than anything that these chats can make.
Absolutely. I know for me, what not to get too political, but I do live in America, and one of the ways that I processed my feelings about the 2016 election was I wrote a horror scenario inspired by the Magdalene Laundries because that was what I was personally afraid of, and sort of making it as extreme as possible. You know, I made something cool, and I was able to sort of handle my own feelings about the situation. And you can't really do that using a language model. Like it's not even AI, it's just a language model.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, so it's great to be inspired by, but not to look for inspiration from, I guess, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
Yeah, there's also
Yeah.
better ways to find inspiration because usually, so I mean, the thing that this is kind of a hard I'm gonna go like real hard, just bear with me, engineering brain. I am not an engineer, but my husband is.
Mhm.
And people use the word AI, and that's just incorrect for what we have right now. It's not an artificial intelligence. It's not an intelligence. It is a aggregation of everything that is out there and everything that has been taught. So first of all, whatever it is you're utilizing can only pull from what it has learned on and how it has iterated.
Mhm.
And also it's a database searcher that has some predictive models attached to it. So your question of like I would like to come up with a scary scenario. Well, if that's your prompt or whatever you're asking it, then you're going to get like something very, just go on Google and you didn't even need AI
Mhm.
to ask that same question. And you must narrow it down. And in the process of narrowing it down, you're going to come up with a better idea on your own than it could probably give you. So my best advice for any time whenever you're looking for inspiration for literally any kind of writing scenario, anything, is to just consume so much of that
Right.
stuff. And that's what those things do, yes. But when it consumes it, and creates a prompt or a nugget of an idea, it cannot iterate on those ideas. It can only amalgamate them together.
Hmm.
It cannot function the way a real brain works.
Yeah, well,
That's the difference.
I think that Mike Flanagan's Midnight Mass is some of the best modern horror writing,
Yes.
and you you can't get Midnight Mass in a world where Mike Flanagan didn't already write it. The LLM isn't going to come up with that on its own.
No. It may right. It now if you said I want to write a story that's similar to Midnight Mass, right? And it gives you a prompt. It's just going to give you
Mhm.
scenarios from Midnight Mass and other related things that it has found similar to it, religious horror, as it were. But if you watch all of Midnight Mass and then you take any one scenario from it and you say to yourself, well, what if the outcome of that situation was different? What
Right.
if? A lot of story inspiration comes from you asking yourself, what if? From literally anything you've seen in the world, media, in movies, watching a kid running down the street, asking
Mhm.
yourself, what if? And then following that to its logical conclusion.
I mean, inspiration is a beautiful thing. Yes, you're going to be drawing from the masters. You're going to be drawing from, what's out there, but you are going to make it a hell of a lot better. Uh, I mean, not to toot my own horn, but uh, there's a wonderful movie called Southbound, and there's an excellent sequence where a woman runs out into the road and gets hit by a car, and the guy has to deal with that in the middle of nowhere, and he starts getting some really bad information. I love that bit, but I asked the question, okay, what happens if it wasn't a girl, it was an angel?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And that became the entire, oh, honestly, that became the entire campaign. And I was never expecting what the players would do, because what they did completely threw me for a loop, but it made the entire story so much better.
Yep.
All
I
right.
think
Awesome.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
one more thing on this. I think doing a search of the news or new scientific discoveries will lead you to more interesting places than just going and asking a chatbot, "Hey, what scenarios?" Because like there's a lot of stories about scientists discover uh bacteria deep within the ice, or science, or like new um LiDAR imagery reveals uh temple ruins in middle of jungle, or new discovery found at bottom of ocean, or stuff like that. um and you can spin off so much from that, or just walking through a store and go, or like an antique store, and then like looking at, or a thrift store, and going, what how did this thing get here? What was this thing's story? And
Yeah.
what can I do to make this mundane thing completely weird? You
Yep.
know, like the haunted doll stories are really really popular, and it's a very common like retelling urban legend and stuff like that. The haunted doll, Annabelle, that sort of stuff. It's like, what if something malicious was in this innocent thing? Or how would you explain this thing being in this person's house? I have an example of that where, if you know Japan, this is a little kid's backpack for elementary school.
They're so
And this is
cool.
a little girl's one. If I found this in a male friend's house who's an American who doesn't have a child, why is it there?
Mm-hmm.
What's going on? There's something not right. I asked my son this. It's like, hey, Victor, if you saw this in the house and I wasn't here, I was like already PCSed or something, what would you do? And he's like, I'd start looking for the girl that belongs to.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Because he knows I'm a horror writer. So it's that sort of thing. It's like, what would you do to explain this weird thing being in someone's house? And what questions would you ask? What venues? It's like you start getting kind of start skewing and then spinning. And just something like that can be a really good inspiration. Just walking around, looking at the mall, going to a mall, a thrift store, or just going through eBay auction story of the haunted section will get you a lot of really weird places to go.
Okay,
Yeah.
we've got a bunch of really great answers. Lots of amazing insight. So let's move on to the next question. So, this is specific to role-playing game writing. So, tabletop RPGs can all trace their lineage back to the original Dungeons and Dragons, which had a really strong emphasis on combat and fighting monsters. It's pretty much all you did. Fight the monsters, get stuff to go fight bigger monsters. And you still sort of, through the lineage of RPG design, you still see this expectation of action versus role play in many, many games. And so, how do you sort of work with this in your writing when your horror is supposed to be more cosmic or cerebral, or there's not something that you're supposed to be able to fight?
So, usually, especially for like a one shot, because you got to build up to a climax, right? Usually using like a 3 act structure where it's like, okay, here's the normal, here's the turn, and now we're kind of escalating, sort of thing. Because because the cosmic horror thing isn't scary unless you have the normal. Like you
Mhm.
have to have that moment of there's something weird going on, and you can, in a longer campaign, it's easier to build up that creeping dread. But when you're doing something like a one shot where you only have 3 hours, you have to start with the normal and then make that turn very quickly based off of player choices in like that ambient sort of thing. And giving the players something to fight is that sort of catharsis. It's like, okay, there's this creepy thing happening, and now I'm dealing with the big horror in its physical form. And even if I can't permanently kill it, I'm still going to shoot it. Like,
Um,
I still want to shoot it. I still want to set it on fire. Um, and even if it doesn't stop the thing, at least I try. Like,
Mhm.
I think it's that hope that maybe, just maybe, the thing that you're going to do is going to stop this cosmic evil just long enough that you can escape. If it's like a cult scenario where you have to
yeah,
sacrifice a friend, it's like,
yeah,
okay, I kind of really don't actually like you, so you talk during movies and spoil everything. So here you go, cosmic horror, eat this person.
sure. What about what about my other three designers?
Um, so I have this kind of thought that one of the ways that horror is horrific is by turning tropes on their heads, right? So this expectation, and I do get it, right? When people are sitting down to play a game, they're looking at like, well, how do I shoot the thing? How do I attack the thing? Like, what are my combat abilities? So one of the ways to think about leaning into that in a way that subverts that trope and creates a situation that is horrific is to obscure the thing they're fighting. So you have a scenario and it seems pretty straightforward. We go in, we kill the thing, and we're 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 done. And when we come out of it, we realize either A, we didn't actually kill anything. That wasn't anything, that was all in our heads, or that wasn't what we thought we were killing. We've massacred innocent people. Or there's so many number of things that a routine combat could uh, turn into just honestly a horrific situation. Um, I'm just on a whim earlier while I was passing time waiting for this panel, I was playing Slay the Princess. Um, and I had never played it before, but I had heard a lot of good things about it, and I was playing it. And it literally is this like, you go in, you're told you're supposed to kill this princess or the world will end. And you do. And it is just everything is not as it seems. And the psychological horror that you can draw in from, oh yeah, people are, yeah, you were told to go kill some people. You killed those people. Everything is not as it seems. Is a good way to lean into that expectation without just, making something unkillable in a frustrating way. I think that's the biggest thing to keep in mind is let players do the things they want to do and give them the agency to make the choices they want to make, and don't just make their choices not matter. Like having their choices matter and having, oh, we killed these things. Okay, well,
Yeah.
how do
Mhm.
we how do we spin out consequences from that?
Steve or Jason?
Well, this is one of the difficult things with horror RPGs because the whole essence of horror is the unknown. That's where the fear comes from.
Mhm.
And with D&D, we meet the monster. Oh, we enter the room. There it is. We deal with it. Enter the next room. Oh, there's another monster. We deal with it. Well, here's the problem. In horror, no monster, as soon as you pull the mask off, nothing that you've created is going to be as worse as what's already been in the player's minds.
Right.
Mhm.
So I don't, when I write, I don't go for conclusions. I go for resolutions. And what I mean by that is that basically it's the whole buildup. It's the experience and how the characters themselves respond to what happens at the end. So, and that's probably why I like J horror so much, because and that's where you can see the major difference between when it's comes to Hollywood. There is almost always a conclusion. The good guys win.
Mm-hmm.
If you take a look at J horror in its core, you don't win
Well,
because
and there are no good guys.
you're because you're dealing with an elemental force that you can't defeat nature. Sure, you might be able to survive it, but the more interesting narrative is, okay, I've survived this experience. How has it changed me?
Yep.
Oh,
Yeah.
your mic is not on, Steve. Looks like you're talking, but we can't hear you.
Okay.
Oh, wait, no, I think there you are.
Is that better?
Yep.
Yeah.
Now we
Yes.
can hear you.
Okay. I didn't change any settings. I just went to the test your mic thing on Zoom, and suddenly,
Oh,
we're working
no.
again.
Oh, I
Oh,
hope we
no.
haven't been talking over you this whole
No,
time.
that's okay. That's okay. So this is one of the main things that brought me to horror in TTRPGs to begin with. Because even though modern D&D is very clear about, there are three pillars, there are still a whole lot of tables out there where there is exactly one. It's all about kill everything that moves, burn anything that doesn't. And that's just not a satisfying story to me. So one of the things I love about horror is if you know that if you rush into combat against the monsters, you're going to lose. It kind of pushes you to do other things instead and explore other options instead and tell other kinds of stories instead. I've found one of the easiest and most interesting to me, at least, ways of categorizing different kinds of players is to describe 10 candles to them.
Yes.
Oh,
Because
yeah.
half of them will say, oh, that sounds awesome. When can we play? The other half will say, well, what's the point if you know you're going to lose?
Yeah.
And
Yep.
with all due respect, the first group are my people.
Yes.
Right.
The other thing that I will say, just all due respect to WotC and their brand narrative, tabletop RPGs don't all trace their lineage back specifically to D&D. They trace back to a much, much, much deeper well than that. You've got decades of theater games, hundreds of years of improv, commedia dell'arte. You got thousands of years of collaborative storytelling. So you don't have to go to just that toolbox. You've
That's a
got
really good
so
point.
many other options to go with.
All right, so we have another question from Age of Adventure RPG. What is your number one tip for writing a scenario for a 3-hour one-shot at a convention?
Yes. The timing thing is always hard. So I like to impose a some sort of time limit that's like internal to the a diegetic time limit. So like, hey, I have to find this person by this time. Like when I wrote Rat in a Burning Cage for Trinity Continuum Assassins, I decided that the best way for that sort of thing, where you're going in, you're looking for a missing assassin, a retired assassin, a governor of this thing, was like, okay, there's a storm coming, it's isolated. If you do not get to the drop within 2 hours, you're trapped here, surrounded by hostiles, and they're all retired assassins, and you're not a part of this community. They will kill you if you don't do this, and you won't be able to get out. So, okay, you guys got 2 hours, go. And so that sort of like internal deadline makes sense in the structure of the narrative where you're not necessarily railroading them, but it's also like for your pacing things too. At this time, uh, if this trigger has not happened, you need to escalate sort of thing to try to move them along. And then because players are chaotic, especially my friends, they're gremlins. They instead of having like because the paralysis of choice is what slows you down in any sort of game, especially when people are new to the system. So you presenting them options. It's like, okay, instead of saying, what do you want to do? Which is just like everyone's like, what can I do? You give them
Yeah.
like you can give them three options because everyone
Mhm.
likes threes. So it's like, hey, do this, this, or this. And then you have kind of like a if and statements. So if they go this path, then it can lead to this, they can lead to this, they can lead to this. Like some of my convention game planning things don't have like a very firm resolution. It just has like something bad happens here because I'm trying to riff off of what the players are going to do. And so it's like just having those options in hand. It's like if if they do this, these things could happen or this could happen, and it could lead to these resolutions because you never know what they're actually going to latch onto because they might decide, like I do, to go a completely different route you didn't plan for. And so just being flexible in that way will save your brain from like rage
Mm.
quitting GMing entirely and like throwing all your notes in a bin. It's just like,
Yeah.
okay, so just providing them options is like, hey, these are the options. And if they say something that doesn't quite work, you can adjust on the fly. Because if you have things that are like super rigid, you're going to get stuck.
Hmm.
And then you'll be like,
Yeah.
now I need to reroute this.
Okay.
So my suggestion is, so I've written a lot of GMing advice in my day, and my biggest, most useful suggestion is to never plan a conclusion, but also just uh, plan for specific scenes. Pacing is important, and you're the director of the pace whenever you're running a game for somebody. But if you're just writing a scenario, or you're developing a scenario, or you're just, kind of putting something out to the world, um, the the biggest way that I would suggest to like plan for a one shot 3 hours is limit your limit your story. People are always thinking about plots and subplots and connections and interconnectedness and, well, this leads to this, then leads to this, and here's all this web of conspiracy. And keep it simple, because one, you never know how the players are going to react to a thing, what they're going to latch on to. So you need to be prepared to pivot and be allowed to kind of yes and your players, but also you are the ones they are looking towards to give them the next piece of information, the next thing that they're supposed to do. If you've ever played any of the gumshoe type games, investigation is always successful. It's an investigation game. It's not about whether or not they find the thing, it's how much of the stuff they find.
I
And
really
it's,
like that mechanic.
yeah,
Mhm.
so if it is an important aspect of a story that the players need to know to be able to move forward, do not hide it behind a chance roll. Do not hide it
Yeah.
behind something that's going to take them forever to find or figure out. Instead, give that to them up front. And then their decision points are what do they do with this information? How do they respond to this information? Where do they go next with this information? And then, yes, give them options. Don't just say, okay, well, you have it. What do you do next? Um, lead them forward. But the scenario itself needs to be pretty straightforward. It can have a surprise reveal, it can have a surprise twist, it can have, implications to a greater story, but itself needs to be a single plot line, a single through line that is carried through for the 3-hour story. And that's my
All right. Thank you. Steve or Jason?
I'm just picking up on what Dee said about not hiding things behind skill rolls. On the one hand, I absolutely, completely, 100% agree. Taking it in a different direction, though, I have a couple of places in my scenario where I explicitly explain to the GM, let's call it Cthulhu, so it's keeper. You know, they're going to succeed at this. The role is to determine how it goes, how graceful it is.
Mm-hmm.
In particular, there is a moment at the beginning. They're firefighters. They arrive at a burning house. There's a little kid in a window. It seems pretty obvious to me that we got to do something about that. And I included some tips for if your players are really trying to be ornery, how to get them to cooperate. But it ends up being really important to the plot that they rescued that girl, and specifically that the players, as much as the characters, chose to do that. So having a skill roll that makes it feel like, this is something I'm trying to do, um, is important to me, and I think it's important to the scenario. But yeah, if the rolls go horribly, um, it's not a no. It's just
yes, but
a maybe somebody else helps out here. You know, um,
yeah, yeah, I do so the other my day job is to work on the Gloomhaven franchise, and I am working on the Gloomhaven RPG. And one of the things that uh, a hallmark of Gloomhaven is that your choices really matter in that game, and there's a lot of branching, what could happen depending on how you decide, this, and this. And we wanted to take that to the extreme in the RPG. And so one of the things that we tell the GMs is that, you know, it's like the rule of improv. You do not ever just end a thing just because somebody failed a roll.
mhm.
If the you set the stakes of the action, and sometimes you fail a roll and it's like, okay, well, you broke the lock that you were trying to get through and you can't get in there, and that doesn't end things. It just means you have to find a different route, or you need to go and do a different thing altogether, and now you're locked out of ever taking that route. You don't just get to try again. And I think, knowing in horror that sometimes the horror isn't failing to do a thing. The horror is doing a thing poorly or causing consequences because you tried to do a thing and maybe you succeeded, but you
Or
should
doing
not
a
have
thing
done
and
that.
then finding out what it is that you actually did.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, we we cleaned up that weird salt circle that was outside. It was, causing lots of problems for the animals. Oh no, we released the demon. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Alright.
There's a conversation that keeps coming up on social media over and over and over and over again. A debate that basically goes back and forth between, so if you have a big combat and things are going poorly, do you fudge the rolls to make the players win, or do you have the TPK that comes out of nowhere and doesn't mean anything? The monsters don't have to fight to kill. They can
Mhm.
take prisoners. We're talking about, usually in those conversations, we're talking about a system where, the afterlife is just another plane. You can come back.
Yeah.
The role
Yeah.
can matter and still not be just
Yeah.
a flat no.
Right. There are consequences other than death.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah. All right. Well, so we haven't heard from Jason yet. So, what would your number one tip be for writing a convention scenario?
Uh, let's see. It's kind of a two-parter because it depends on which way you're approaching your story, because there's are they going to make characters themselves, or are you going to write the characters for them? Basically, if you're going to write the characters for them, it's a little more easy because you can see where the narrative threads are and where your crisis points are probably going to hit, because your trick is to basically make sure that there are crisis points, how they're going to respond to the narrative and how they're going to respond to each other. If they're going to be generating characters, that's a little more complex because now you have to be a little more flexible with your narrative.
And
Basically,
that's going to eat into your time, too.
mm-hmm. In that case, what you want to do is uh, break it into like a 4-point story. You have your introduction, you have your development, you have your twist, and then you have your resolution.
Mhm.
Create little, basically have in your head the crisis points, the set scenes that you want to have show up, because they're integral to the actual narrative. They don't have to the characters don't have to solve something. It's just basically that event's probably going to happen and they're going to respond to it. When I wrote The Last Transmission, the core of the story was basically they're chasing an urban legend and they find it. They find the
Mhm.
actual source of it. The story itself was each of them had been touched in some way by this urban legend. One had lost a lover. One had actually seen this thing and survived. Another didn't believe in it and was a complete skeptic. And I think that the last was basically, they were trying to use the others to make their own way and basically become,
Mhm.
famous on YouTube. It was the conflicts between the players that actually created the resolution at the end, when they found themselves in a completely different realm and they just turned on one another like
That
there
sounds
was no
like really
tomorrow.
great design. We have this question. Last night, this morning, time is a myth. When I was on the one shot versus campaign panel, and my favorite piece of advice was only give the players one problem. And another one is it's always been an element of horror is isolation. So wherever they are, for whatever reason, they can't leave.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. So that was a great round of answers. Let's do this next question, a little bit of round robin, or rapid fire. Uh, do you have any subgenres of the umbrella horror genre that you find easier or harder to work with, or a particular rule set that you always find yourself going back to?
Hmm.
Now, are we talking
Uh,
about writing or running, like designing in our heads?
Uh, this is about developing a scenario, so let's talk about writing for an RPG setting.
I not necessarily rule systems. I don't have any that I find myself going to specifically, but I really, really, really enjoy like sci-fi horror. Is specifically like consequences of technology is often real easy for me to jive with.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I really love exploring creepy weird. I will always take a shiver over a jump, especially if we're talking about somebody who I'm going to be playing with for several hours, possibly several weeks. I'd like them to come back. Um, yeah, the creepy, the weird, um, the stuff where you're not quite sure what's real and what's not, and whether there really is a neat and tidy difference between those two things.
Yeah, I also like sci-fi horror, and especially like a contemporary setting in our interactions with technology as somewhat, the 80s children that grew up with the explosion of the internet. Like I use text-based internet
Hmm.
from the library for a
Hmm.
while, and then seeing the shift from like text-based MUDs and stuff into like the MMORPGs and things like that, and going from
Yep,
like the BBSs to Yim and all this other stuff
yep.
to Discord has been how people interact and how they communicate has something that's been very fascinating for me, and I like using that as a recurring theme in a lot of horror scenarios when I have that sort of control. And then like when I look at more historical pieces, it's like that lack of communication and that sort of isolation is something I like to build on because it's a lot of things could be solved in a lot of storylines with like actually talking to somebody. Uh, that
Hmm.
those miscommunications, but then like if you don't have the technology piece, it becomes a matter of being trapped in propriety and like societal roles where you don't just say that sort of thing. So the
Hmm.
things that you don't say or like you're supposed to interpret these things with fans or whatever. So
Hmm.
that sort of like lack of communication is a nice theme I like to come back to for those sorts of scenarios, which isn't necessarily what the question is, but I figure it's a different way of approaching it, the technology piece in
Sure.
a low tech sort of world.
Hmm.
When I'm designing, I usually go for uh, like my sweet spot. I think is uh, liminal horror and surrealism. I I love throwing characters in scenarios where something just isn't. Well, I'm even going to say it and unplug this. Something isn't right here. The
Go for
David
it.
ba- the David Lynch role playing game. And if you want to do one shots, I would definitely suggest maybe picking up something like this because everything is just basically designed. The entire story is made by cards. Great game. But for me, I just like designing surreal horror and psychological horror and creating scenarios where the characters themselves start tearing their own reality down. And on the opposite, when as a designer, I find writing, and I hate to say this, stuff like Call of Cthulhu, where everything is you got to find this clue, you got to find that, because a lot of the spontaneity gets lost. So the more that the characters can just interact with wherever they are, rather than having to find this book on that particular shelf to solve this particular mystery. That's
Yeah. I've always felt that the core of a good role-playing scenario is the choices that players have.
Yes.
And when I ran my one shot for the convention yesterday, the scenario ended with the vampire prince of the city confronting the party, the coterie, being like, "Okay, well, you've saved these two very pathetic, very helpless people. Uh, Only one of them gets to live. You choose. I don't care." And so how do you make that choice? Who makes that choice? Who pulls the trigger on that choice? And I think that there's a lot of horror inherent in making player characters make that sort of choice. Um,
Uh,
okay,
can I say one thing? Because I
go
literally
ahead.
just because and if you're designing scenarios, just remember when you're writing it, it's not your story.
Mhm.
If you wanted to make your story, write a novel.
Mm-hmm.
And a perfect example is for Halloween, just to get back to our roots, I ran the haunted house for Call of Cthulhu, one of the first modules in classic Call of Cthulhu. Beautiful scenario, but the problem was, I guess I scared my characters and the players so bad they didn't make it past the first room.
Oh
So they
no.
they literally left the house.
Oh dear.
And I had to make up pretty much everything else on the fly to get them
Oh
back to the
no.
house.
They noped right out of there.
Yeah.
All right. Well, so this has been a really amazing panel. We've got some really great questions, some really great answers. I loved our discussion about LLMs, AI. So let's end with a question about endings. Endings can be the most difficult of any piece of writing, and we've sort of touched on that in some of the answers that we've already given. Endings can be especially difficult in horror, and especially, as we've already touched on, when players do something you didn't expect or didn't anticipate. So, how do you keep your endings focused, either for one-shots or campaigns or whatever you're running? So, how do you keep your endings focused, and what do you think makes a good horror RPG ending?
Ah, yeah, that's kind of hard because it really depends on the choices the players made.
Mhm.
Because you can always echo back to the beginning. Those sorts of like things can be quite satisfying. That thing you said at the beginning now becoming the ending. But that could also feel kind of predictable. Everyone's seen so many Twilight Zone or Outer Limits episodes at this point. It's but making the ending is always satisfying when it's based off of the things the players have decided. If it's some arbitrary ending where it's like, wow, I'm really glad I played, I guess, because if that was always the outcome, then what was the point of me being here? Um, but coming to that sort of point, because it's like con game sort of thing. I keep coming back to that because one shots are always really hard. It's like, okay, we have 5 minutes left to the game. We just got to the big boss fight. What would be really satisfying for the players right now to end this on a high note where they accomplish the thing that they were trying to do, and then the consequences thereof? Or we got to this point and we reach out and time, and it's like, fuck. you
Yeah.
know sometimes leaving that sort of cliffhanger and then it's like, okay, now we need to footnote this, can be really frustrating. So it's like that time management piece. It's just, but I think it really just, well, based off the things that you guys did, this is what would have happened or what could have happened.
Mhm.
And if we play this again, we'll pick up from that fade to black.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Missing
Uh,
reel is my favorite thing, and like that they came from. It's like, and reel missing. So
yeah.
that was crazy how that happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I uh I'm gonna agree with Kim here, but I'm gonna pull it back a little bit, which is that um you need to like, so horror endings in stories, movies, whatever, they're very difficult. They're so hard. I've seen so many movies where I watch the movie and I'm enjoying the crap out of it, and then I get to the third act, and then I'm like, why is this happening? And then it ends, and I'm like, well, that sure was a movie. And I I think that it's important to make sure that whatever ending you end up with, based on player choices, is satisfying. It doesn't have to be that they accomplish the thing they were trying to do. It doesn't have to be that they win the day. It doesn't even have to be like as was mentioned, 10 Candles, which absolutely love that game, especially for one shot. I mean, it's a one-shot game in the first place, but I absolutely love it for teaching people about how to be more narrative in horror, because it's not about the ending, it's about the journey to the ending, but everybody's ending is different. They all die in the end, but how they die is what's most important. And so making sure that players' choices in their story and they have agency in their own ending is extremely important. Nailing an ending of a horror story is really hard, and but for a collaborative story such as an RPG, making sure that, as Kim said, the player's actions have they are echoed in the ending, and then also that they are satisfying in some way, that the players are, yes, this feels like the logical conclusion of what we did, or this, we didn't survive, but it makes sense that this is how this ended.
So I'm gonna kick this in as a little more food for thought, still sort of on the same topic of how you do a good horror RPG ending. This comes from our producer. Thank you, kind producer. A lot of one-shots end in a big fight to the bitter end, at least the ones I have GM'd. Maybe these kinds of endings work well for one-shots. How could a different kind of ending in a one-shot provide a punch, but not a big boss fight? So how do you get that big wow ending without a couple rounds of combat?
S- So, I think that personally for me, uh, so there's an ending that is, you know, so a lot of folks forget about, they're like, great climax, but then there's something that comes at the end of the climax, right? It's not a climax if there's nothing on the other side of it. It's only a line. So a lot of people forget about conclusions to stories in RPGs. Ah, we killed the bad guy. We fought a big thing and now it's over. Well, what's the conclusion here? Like, what is are we just, oh, happily ever after? I mean, this is a horror story. Of course not. There's consequences and there's all these things. So the story's focus isn't shouldn't the emotional resonance shouldn't come from the fight itself. It should come from the consequences of the fight, so
Mhm.
that your endings feelings are about what comes next, what comes after all that. And so I think thinking about, okay, well, what happens if they do get into this fight, or if they try to do this thing, or they complete a ritual to seal away an evil entity that could not be fought otherwise.
Yeah,
Um,
so to invoke Midnight Mass again, I guess, and spoilers if you haven't seen it, skip ahead a minute or two.
La la la
Uh,
la la la.
yeah.
the ending there isn't defeating the big bad. The ending there comes down to an individual question amongst all the characters of essentially sacrifice or survival.
Yep.
Uh, and again, spoiler, the final line of the show is I can't feel my legs. And that has so many implications for the character who says that and what they've been through and what that means for what's going to happen in the next 5 minutes
Yep.
that we only get to guess at because the show's over now.
Yep. Yep.
So Steve or Jason, your thoughts on creating a good ending for a horror RPG?
I like to give players a choice to make at the end, that's going to affect what happen, what happens in the world moving forward. They may or may not have the information to make a wise choice. And I think there's also the option of doing something kind of adjacent to a big bad boss fight, like hold the big bad at bay until you can lock or unlock or solve this thing over here. Had something else I wanted to say. It is
Okay, well, I'm
late.
gonna
So hopefully it'll come back.
yeah, you catch that thought. What about Jason? We'll come back to you, Steve, when you.
For me, like I said, and others have said, it comes back to resolution, not conclusion. That basically it has to make sense for the story and for the characters themselves. Sure, there's wonderful big bads, but again, once the mask is off, the monster is usually not going to make a satisfying ending. So when I'm designing things, I kind of look at what are the narrative threads that could possibly end, and maybe help lead the narrative towards that, and then just let the players decide how it's going to end. But
and sometimes in a
yeah,
horror game, they want the TPK.
yeah, and as Dee said, it's not that fight; it's the results of that fight that are the more interesting aspect to it, and that's why in every one of the scenarios that I do, I go, okay, where do you see yourself right now? You've stepped out of the house, or a week later, where are you? And usually those, when the player just pours out their guts, that's usually the more interesting ending. For blood dipped wings, oh my god, literally by the end of it, every player was just weeping.
That's
But
great.
they won. They technically won.
Yeah. Yeah, sometimes it's a Pyrrhic victory. Those are the best.
Yeah. And I think sometimes like coming and seeing that there's this, they pull back the veil and there is this bigger conspiracy, this bigger plan that they hadn't accounted for can also be quite powerful because it's like we've only scratched the beginning of what is going on here, and we think that we have the ability to change this. We now recognize this thing is here, and now we can start doing something about it and giving that sort of like the hope of change, or maybe the oh fuck moment. It's like now we have this bigger thing that we can get into, and we have no idea what we should do next. But that would be, really good endings. It was like, oh shit, now what happens next? And where you do go, and you have that. It's a week later. How are you feeling about all of this?
Right.
How has this witnessing and surviving this thing, how does it impact? How do you feel about that? How does this change your life? Those are really powerful moments. It's like, does that resonate with you as a player and as a character?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
And sometimes not having that also can be really powerful. I'm about to say something that will get me disowned by anybody out there who has run 10 candles. But the last time I ran 10 candles, I didn't kill anybody.
How did that
They
go
weren't dead.
then?
But they basically ended up in their version of the upside down,
Ah,
Okay.
in this
Well,
like
that's a way to do
endless
it.
field of weirdness as the camera's pulling back and back and back, and we realize there is absolutely no way out.
uh-huh.
So we don't find out what happens to them. We don't, we don't see them, their lives end, but it
They
sure felt like a satisfying ending at the time.
The
Barb's never coming back.
the poison of hope.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, so we've got 3 minutes left before we do our goodbyes. So top three horror IPs to gain inspiration from, or that you think writers should study.
Ooh. Uh,
So I've already said Midnight Mass. I'm
mhm.
also going to suggest Pluribus. It's only just started, but it's really good at dealing with themes of unity and isolation and individuality. Um, and then what's my third? I don't know what my third is. Someone else go.
Clive Barker.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
Any of his stuff, short stories, his fantasy novels, or his horror films. Definitely lots of inspiration there. Stephen King, because he is the king. Like there's so much stuff there. And then the third one, it's kind of hard because there's so much of it, but like I kind of want to say Tales from the Crypt, the comics and like the associated things as well as like the Vault Keeper, Crypt Keeper stuff. Any of the old anthology stuffs are also really good things, but the more modern parallel from that would be Love, Death, and Robots, because a lot of that is more modern short stories, and there's such a good mix of stuff uh, that maybe you might not have thought about before, but like seeing some horror writers get their stuff animated that way is actually really cool.
Yes. Uh, so for modern type horror or the kind of what if horror, Black Mirror, for uh, sci-fi horror or uh, just the kind of futuristic horror that you could do. I'm gonna, man, there's so many movies that I could point to, but I'm actually gonna point to I think my favorite of those is Event Horizon, and I think it's just because I
Mhm.
have a love of body horror. Um, but I think Sunshine is the name of that
Oh,
movie. It's
yes.
a
Oh, yeah.
much better psychological sci-fi horror type thing. Um, and then which actually I think I haven't watched a playthrough of it. I'm not going to play it myself, but Mouthwashing is
Mm,
a movie or it's a video game that
yes.
is about people who are kind of isolated and trapped on a space station. Um, and I desperately want to watch a playthrough of that. I just haven't yet, for no reason other than I just haven't found time. And then
It'll hurt.
it probably, yeah, I hear it's very freaky. Um, for fantasy type horror, I'm, I'm gonna think about it, but uh, I'll let other people kind of uh, go beyond me on that one. So other people.
Yeah, Steve or Jason.
Kim mentioned Stephen King. Just a shout out to Danse Macabre, his book about writing horror that has so many really cool insights and suggestions and tips. Um, um, I am a fan obsessed with the classics. So part of me always goes back to Poe. Um, I and not even just read the story and think and think and think and think. I wrote a term paper on something of his in grad school, and on the one hand, it was the coolest experience I had ever had in my life. I was obsessing over this piece for a few days, and I had that feeling of what it's like to get inside the mind of the author. I was grad school in English lit, which is a really cool experience to have, and a really, really disturbing place to be when it's Edgar Allan Poe's brain that you're inside.
Yeah.
Right.
We've had so many good, great suggestions. I'm not coming up with a third offhand.
Hi, Jason, how about you?
I mean, Kim already stole Clive Barker. I mean, my entire bookshelf is just Clive Barker.
Yeah.
If
Kim
I would
coming
also
in.
I would also suggest some manga like PTSD Radio and Junji
Oh, yeah.
Ito.
Junji
Oh, yeah.
Ito. Yeah. Thank you.
So, and I'm currently reading I think it's called 100 Ghost Stories that will kill
Before
me.
you die. Before
Yes.
you
Yeah,
die.
before I
Yeah.
die.
Yeah.
For psychological horror, of course, I mean David Lynch. Pretty much anything by David Lynch. Just Twin Peaks. Just suck that stuff in. I mean, he was doing it before the YouTube was. So,
Yep.
and I mean, I will throw other little things like Yomawari Midnight Shadows, which is it is one of the cutest, most horrifying games I've ever played, and each one of the series is just. It also has one of the greatest fourth wall breaks that nearly snapped my controller because I jumped so hard.
All right.
Yeah.
I've decided. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, horror is just such a broad genre. There's so many good things because like with folk horror, you just
Mhm.
talk to old folks or people
Mhm.
out in the
Yeah.
boonies, like all those like folks tales. Like if you like existential dread, like Algernon Blackwood stuff is really good. Chamberlain's works are really great. Author mentions with like the white people is a really
Mhm.
good inspiration too. There's just so much to do, and if you're looking more transgressive, there are so many people in the splatterpunk. It gets really squicky really quick. There's very specific tropes with that are really uncomfortable. Uh,
I have to
but
give out a shout out
there's
to
a lot of it.
Brian Keene since since
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
he's helped me in a couple of books. So
So
Oh yeah.
I've actually decided my third is gonna be, it's not actually horror, it's Sons of Anarchy. It's a TV show about a biker gang, but it's a really good character study on being your own worst enemy
Mm.
Mm.
and how all of your choices are bad and they only make things worse for you.
It's one of my favorite Hamlet retellings.
It's really good. How
Yeah.
about you, Steve? Have you
and
picked your third?
Sort of on a similar. It's not horror, but as Sons of Anarchy, Welcome to Nightville.
Mm-hmm.
It
Yeah.
goes silly a lot of the times, but the sheer world building.
Oh, it's
Uh-huh.
very good. Yeah.
and if you need a really good you know a night of a cosmic horror, anything by Benson and Moorhead, Resolution Spring, the Endless. I mean, oh yeah, just sit back and enjoy.
Yeah.
All right.
I honestly just gonna go with gothic horror because I can't find very much fantasy horror. It's just not really a thing that people do very much of. So if anybody wants to like own that genre, go for it. Uh, but I'm gonna go with gothic horror instead and say go watch Crimson Peak.
That one's
Oh
good
yeah, that's
Oh
really
too.
yeah,
good.
anything by Guillermo del Toro is
Yeah.
just
Yes, of course.
All
Watch the new
right.
Frankenstein. It was so freaking good.
Yeah.
So
And read
we
the original,
only
which is
hmm
so fantastic.
yeah, so I think we only have about 4 or 5 minutes left. In reverse order from how we started, let's just say introduce yourselves to anyone else who arrived later and promote whatever you want to promote. We're gonna start with D.
Hi, I'm Dee. You can find me at daniellelauzon.com. I am currently working on the Gloomhaven role-playing game, which should be out hopefully in 2026 at some point. We are in the last phases of production, but it turns out we are a board game company and there's a bunch of things that go with it, and importing board games into the US right now is very difficult. But if you're in Europe, it would be it's easier. But unfortunately, we're American based, so me. Um, so it is a dark fantasy, but it's a little more on the like swords and sorcery side and a little less on the horror side. But you can absolutely do horror games with it because there's some pretty honestly very dark things in the world. Otherwise, the newest game that I worked on, Curseborn, is just been released to Drive-Thru RPG on print on demand. You can also still go and pre-order the traditionally printed version that will be printed. It was if you go to the Kickstarter page, there's a backer kit late submission pledge thing you can do for it. And we also have a player's guide that just went to Kickstarter in October that finished up. And I'm pretty sure the pledge manager is open for that now. It may not be quite yet. Anyway, so those are the big things. But you can check out all my work at my website. And, you know, there's some links there to follow for Drive-Thru RPG where you can pick up some of my stuff that I've worked on or other folks' stuff if you want. Anything that you buy through that link gives me a tiny little kickback. It's so tiny, but it's a little extra. So I appreciate
Okay.
it.
And you can check out those links in our chat. Jason Fryer, what are you up to? What would you like to promote?
Well, I'm Jason Fryer. You can find me on Blue Sky at Otter Poet. That's otter like the furry thing, poet like the writer. Currently writing for Hearts of Ravensdale for the Legend in the Mist, trying to throw a little horror into that as well. You know, some folk horror. Apparently, the rewrite of Frozen Moments from Second Ed Cult will be coming out for Cultmas.
Okay.
At least that's the rumor. We'll see. I've also written several parts for the Borderlands and for Illusions that it should be coming out quite soon. And beyond that, maybe next year there will be more news as I begin creating my own game company. So
Hey.
you're the first people to hear it.
Oh.
Awesome. All right, Steve Anderson.
I'm Steve Anderson. You can find me on the socials at Tall Halfling, sometimes Tall Halfling RPG. You'll find me playing and running games all over Twitch and YouTube. For horror, most often Miskatonic Playhouse and Symphony Entertainment. And you'll most recently find me on Drive-Thru RPG. I have a Call of Cthulhu scenario called Arkham Fire that just recently went silver, and an original rules light system that's still got some evolving to do.
All right, and last but not least, Kim Godwin.
All right, I'm Kim Godwin. You can find me through all of my socials, through my website, KimberlyGodwin.com, with X and then Instagram and stuff like that. I'm Kim Godwin 18 on Blue Sky. I'm just K Godwin .Blue Sky .social. Let's see. Most recently, we put out the Onyx Path put out the anthology for Curseborn called A Curse Tales. You can find that on Drive-Thru RPG or Drive-Thru Fiction. I also have my comics on Drive-Thru Fiction, so Touching the Abyss. You can find that there. I also have my short story collection, Forsaken, there if you just want to see me write things that aren't necessarily TTRPGs, but you can find my work on through my website or through Drive-Thru RPG, searching Kimberly Godwin or Kim Godwin, which will get you all of it, because things are kind of weird that way. But we're upcoming is going to be Heaven is Red with Sons of Singularity, which is Eldritch Horror in space. And then, of course, we have the Curseborn City of Curses book that we're working on right now, and then some other things that we're working on. I have a jumpstart that'll be coming out for At the Gates, where I developed it, which is a Damon's Bargain. So that's more of a high fantasy JRPG sort of thing, which was a lot of fun to develop and then shepherd someone through the process. And then there's a bunch of other things that I've worked on with the Earthbane cycle that should be popping up soon, hopefully.
That's awesome. I've been your moderator. My name is Rachel. You can find me at Stolen Fires, pretty much everywhere on the internet. Mostly twitch.tv/Stolen Fires, where I run a lot of small indie horror RPGs. We're having a lot of fun over there. I'm also Stolen Fires over on Blue Sky, where you can find pictures of my cat and my garden, and also thoughts on RPGs. So this has been a really great panel. Thank you for everyone who participated. Thank you to our producer for producing from behind the scenes. And thank you for chat. Thank you for your questions. You started some really great discussions. So yeah, is there anything we should promote coming up next in this slot? All right. In that case, have a good night, evening, morning. Have a good time zone, everybody.
Take care.